All right. Welcome back to another episode of Friends from Work. This is a podcast about all things in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it's a podcast that's hosted by me, Kyle Sconowill, and my longtime friend from work, Robert Earl. Robbie, welcome to Friends from Work. I wanted to start off today with a part one, if you will, of a few parts of massive rollouts that we are going to be doing over on Friends from Work. And if you are active online, you probably already know about a couple of these. But before I dive in, how are you doing? And I just want to say hi.
Hey.
Hi.
Good to see you.
Okay, good. All right. Okay, so we have a lot of really cool updates coming really soon. This is just the first of many. So update number one today, we have officially started our transition from our Slack community to our now newly found Discord community. What? Oh yeah, I gotta play the shocking. Hold on, here we go.
There it is. Thank you.
So this is actually, of all the changes, the one that actually will affect people the most, in that I know a lot of people got comfortable with Slack and got used to it. And sometimes when you're comfortable and used to something, change is not your favorite thing. And so moving over to a new platform is not always the easiest thing to do. Here's a little bit of information of the behind the scenes for us. When we started it, we liked the functionality of Slack, and we still do, but we liked some of the features that it offered, and Robbie was very comfortable with it actually from work, because of work, which
Right.
we're finding out is actually a lot of people's usage of it.
Which I also, liked thematically.
Yeah,
given
totally.
the title of our podcast.
And it's been amazing for us, but we have found out that the free version of Slack is basically for, for work, like for 5 to 10 to 15 employees, maybe 50 employees, but we're now pushing 700 people. And there are some functionality limitations we're hitting, like the amount of polls we can do, the length of time that the videos and images stay on Slack, how we archive channels, things like that, we're hitting our limitations. And so we're moving to something we maybe should have done from the beginning, but we're moving over to Discord, where the functionality is actually built a lot more for a public community more than Slack, which is more for like a work community. And so we're actually super stoked on it. It seems like a lot of our listeners have already made the transition over there.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I think, are maybe even more comfortable with Discord. Like maybe they were comfortable with Discord in the first place and had to learn Slack for us.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're kind of back home. That's my take on what I see happening.
Yeah, I think it has to be said that from the beginning, Kyle had posed Discord as an option, and I was familiar with Slack. And again, we both still like Slack a lot, but I just feel like we've started on this show looking back and saying where we were right and where we were wrong.
Oh,
and
my goodness.
I feel as though I need to come to you today as your humble servant, and tell you, this one goes to you.
Well, thank you. I had seen Discord from the streaming community, which is actually another part of the functionality I think I'm excited about, which is working in Discord into the live streams I've been doing of some of the Marvel video games.
Mm-hmm.
All of that I think is going to be a net positive. So I think you're really going to like it. If you're wondering how to find it, one, we can post an invite link on these show notes, but if you go to the ffwpodcast.com, we have now updated all the join the Slack buttons to be join our Discord buttons. And that link will never expire, so you can use that link forever. And once you get into Discord, there's a little thread on the rules, welcome notes, etc., and how to run the threads, which is actually very helpful that you set up, Robbie. So thank you. And that'll help keep the Discord clean, fresh, and positive. So we're really excited about that. Friends from Work Discord, check it out now. The second part of the update today,
Which some people might have seen on Discord.
Which you might have seen on Discord. If you are a Friends from Work Plus subscriber, you got a special preview at our first ever spin-off podcast that Robbie and I are going to do called get my drum roll, called Screensaver. So here is what Screensaver is. It's not as revolutionary as I just made it sound. In the past, Robbie and I have had a few other projects throughout the years, not that many, that we just really wanted to get into. And they were projects that not only were we passionate about, they were projects we wanted to also shine a light on, maybe for some other reason wanted to talk about something to teach maybe, or something to show people that maybe you missed the first time. And these projects in the past would just show up on your Friends from Work main feed, which bothers the OCD parts of our brain that says this has nothing to do about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which we say every intro. And so we have officially created a spin-off podcast called Screensaver for those episodes to go on there. It will be a separate podcast that you'll have to subscribe to. However, at least for the time being, those episodes will populate on your main feeds. So on a week where maybe in the past we would have talked about The Dark Knight, let's say, now that will show up on your main feed under Friends from Work, but it will be called Screensaver. And if you click on it, it will take you to another podcast. We are really excited about this. We're not launching a full 50 episodes a year type thing. This is going to be 6 to 12 episodes a year on just movies that we really wanted to highlight. But as you'll notice, if you're a Friends from Work Plus subscriber, you got a preview of The Last of Us, which is our first episode that will be launching very soon on the Screensaver feed for everyone to see. And as a reminder, it will be free. This will not be on the Friends from Work Plus platform. I know that's a lot of information, but we are excited about as you've heard us talk about, we're excited about the Mission Impossible series. There's a new Mission Impossible coming out this summer, Dead Reckoning. We maybe... we might have to just toss in a Mission Impossible episode before that movie. We're both massive Christopher Nolan fans. Well, he has a 3-hour epic called Oppenheimer coming out this summer with a massive, massive cast. Maybe we could take a look at, Inception or Interstellar or something like that and see what we can learn before Oppenheimer comes out this summer. Things like that. Indiana Jones is coming out this summer. Do we need to go back through that? So all of those type of films will now land on Screensaver, which again will populate on your main feed. Woo!
So 2 quick thoughts there. One, yes, this is absolutely starting as a small thing that could grow into something else. I think one thing that I've been excited about is for folks that don't really keep up with the MCU or don't follow it. If you enjoy the show and you think that they would enjoy the dynamic, but you have friends that just don't really care about Marvel, then we hope that you'll share this, and this might be a way to bring them into a community that we've really gotten to love. Secondly, we have some brand new artwork that we've yet to debut.
That's true.
To go with the new show. And that is from Friends from Work artist extraordinaire Jacoby Warlick.
Yep.
And it's totally different than what he has typically done and is still doing on the Friends from Work podcast side. But I'm really excited about sharing that as well. So you can look forward to a couple of new surprises whenever that first episode drops.
My closing argument for this first chunk of updates from us is that you may be thinking, if you're a Friends from Work Plus subscriber, what does that mean for Kyle's Movie Club? Well, we're going to tell you all about that next week in a massive announcement, which is Friends from Work Plus 2.0, starting next week. But in regards to the Screensaver films, etc., those are going to move over to Screensaver, so those will be free. As we've said multiple times, Friends from Work Plus is going to turn into a deeper dive into the MCU. So in the case of these films falling into more of a rewatch style pre-MCU project, those will fall under the new movie club category on Friends from Work Plus. So for example, maybe watching Into the Spider-Verse before the new Spider-Verse movie, that would probably fall on the Friends from Work Plus side of things. Or if we want to go back through all of Daredevil season 3 before Born Again, that's on the Friends from Work Plus movie club side of things. Or maybe an X-Men dive before the X-Men stuff. That's all going to be on Friends from Work Plus. So Screensaver is going to be saved, pun intended, for things like The Last of Us, The Menu, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Christopher Nolan movies, stuff that truly has no tie at all to the MCU, whereas anything that we can work into our MCU coverage will go over to Friends from Work Plus. More about that next week. Massive information next week.
And we will, that will all make a lot of sense once you see it laid out. It's not going to be, the lines are not going to be blurry at all, which I'm excited about. The OCD part of my brain is particularly excited about. So it will make a lot of sense as you start to see what Friends from Work Plus is looking like, and then what the Friends from Work main feed and Screensaver looks like. I think within a month or two, all of those rhythms are going to be very clear.
Yeah. Which I trust from you, which is amazing, because even though we are still working through some of the kinks on Discord per se, don't think it means that Robbie hasn't thought about it, because he has thought about it, and that's where I put my trust in this stuff.
Maybe too much?
Yeah, maybe. Totally shifting gears, because we need to get into Spider-Man Far From Home, and actually, by way of a pretty good transition into Spider-Man Far From Home, just this week, we got our first full look at a brand new Secret Invasion trailer. Starring Samuel L. MF Jackson.
Okay, as you were saying that, it just reminded me of something I don't think I've said on the show before. And this was two things. One, this was years ago. Candace and I have been together for like a decade now. So this was early in our relationship. And also, Candace would like me to note that she is in fact a very smart person, and this is not reflective of her outlook
overall
in
intelligence.
But we were watching, I think it was like Pulp Fiction, some Tarantino movie years ago. And I was talking about how much I just love watching Samuel L. Jackson in almost anything. And she was like, yeah, me too. Although it's funny, like, I've never seen someone pronounce Samuel as Samuel like that. And I was like, what do you mean by that?
Wait.
And she was like, well, yeah, it's like normally just Samuel, but like Samuel is sort of a unique thing that I think is really fun.
Oh, she thought that's what the name actually was.
And it took us like 5 minutes going back and forth to realize that she thought it was two names, Samuel Jackson, rather than Samuel L. period Jackson. And so now, like, in the back of my mind, I that comes up whenever I hear that name.
You can tell her.
out.
You can tell her if she feels better about this that I remember thought it was Flaming Yawn for years before I realized it was Filet Mignon.
Dude, it's so funny stuff like that, because there's just unless you see stuff like that in writing, which sometimes you just won't unless you seek it out.
Well, yeah, people say Samuel L. Jackson really fast, like I did. They go, Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah, like Samuel L. Jackson is how that's how I say it. And so she had probably, like, I was part of the problem.
Filet Mignon.
That said, yes, I'm really excited to get into the trailer. Real quickly, I also wanted to let folks know we've had like a lot of fun MCU news lately. However, we have a lot going this week, obviously. And what we're going to start doing, I think, as we kind of get into the next few weeks, is breaking some of this news down project by project. We've gotten some pretty serious updates. Serious in a good way, as in substantial, not serious as in dark. Since last week, we've gotten serious updates. I want to talk kind of in the coming weeks about some updates on What If, which we haven't talked about in forever, and several series. There have been some casting news. Two things I wanted to touch on briefly, just on the writing side of a few projects. One, the writer for Fantastic Four was announced this past week, which is actually serious news in that it is dark and I am in some stage of mourning.
Hold on. I'm going to make you feel better. So once you say it first.
Okay. So Josh Friedman, I believe, did I get that name right? I haven't looked at it here in a second. Was pegged as the writer for Matt Shakman's upcoming Fantastic Four film. The reason why this spurs conflicting feelings in me is that Josh was also the writer of James Cameron's Avatar, The Way of Water. Fantastic Four is arguably my most anticipated MCU film right now, so that's just I'm working through a lot.
Can I stop you? You're going to be so happy. You ready? Josh hopped on Twitter and he said to that article, quote tweeted it and said, to this point, I contributed a tiny, tiny bit to that movie, but I wrote the next Avatar film that hasn't released yet. So they miscredited it. So he is not the writer of the film that you don't like the writing of. He wrote the next one apparently. And then people released, this is way too early, but these articles about like the people that have read the fourth one were like blown away. It's the greatest script of all of them, blah, blah, blah.
The third one or the fourth one?
Oh, sorry. The third one. Sorry.
You never know with Avatar, man.
The second one, well, isn't there going to be like 6 or something? It's supposed to be.
It's wild.
I haven't even seen the second one. But doesn't that make you feel better? He said he did not write the second movie. Yeah. They're miscrediting that.
Okay, I totally missed that. That makes me feel much better. The other thing that makes me feel much better on the writing front is, I don't know if you saw this, but it was announced, I think yesterday, that Zeb Wells is going to be joining the writing team for Deadpool 3.
Yeah, crazy.
Which is very exciting to me. One, because Zeb's work on She-Hulk was some of my favorite, but also because I'm a huge fan of his comics work. He's working on, right now actually, or this week, I should say, there's a new issue of Amazing Spider-Man that he's been working on with John Romita Jr., which has been excellent. I say that because some of the issues not with Romita, I think, have been a little hit or miss, but all the issues with Romita have been some of my favorite Spider-Man comics ever. Zeb's also written a lot of fun stuff, including the X-Men universe and beyond on the comic side. So in terms of a Deadpool fit,
and he's a friend of the pod.
Perfect. He's a friend of the pod, yeah, and we hope to have him back on soon for a variety of reasons. But given his familiarity and history with the X-Men world and just his writing style and sensibility, he's clearly a primarily comedic writer, although he can do drama very well too. I think it's going to make him really a perfect fit for Deadpool in particular. So I think that's great news.
That's another thing that's going to probably fall on the Friends from Work Plus side of things, because I've never seen Deadpool.
Which is wild. Yeah.
So we'll have to go back through those pre any kind of Deadpool announcement. And that's definitely a deeper dive into the MCU. Okay, one last thing before the Secret Invasion trailer and then Far From Home. I just wanted to quick clarify. I looked this up on Wikipedia just now while you're talking about it. Josh Friedman, I don't know what you think about this news I'm about to tell you, but it does say that they are changing the vibe a little bit from like a comedy writer to this, because he wrote War of the Worlds.
Oh, the Tom Cruise movie?
2005. He wrote
I kind of love that movie.
The Black Dahlia. And then
also Far From Home connection.
This is his, good job. This is his upcoming stuff. He's going to write the next Planet of the Apes, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes.
Right.
And he's writing Avatar 4 and 5 and an untitled Star Trek film. He also is writing the Snowpiercer show on TNT.
Interesting. Have not seen, but
I don't really know very much about any of those things, except that is not like a comedy writer anymore. So I don't know if that's good or bad for the Fantastic Four, but I don't think judging it off like what Avatar Way of Water did is fair. I think it's more like they are tone shifting a little bit though. So we'll see.
I think that's actually that'll be interesting. You know, we've talked about the pairing of certain writers and directors so much, and
good point. Maybe a more lighthearted director paired with a more serious writer.
Yeah, I mean, because you think about, like, I think that you look at WandaVision episode 8, right? Like, I think that Shackman has done a really good job of carrying those moments, but also kind of adding in just the right amount of charm. So I feel like that could be, because you don't want the Fantastic Four to be a comedy per se. It just needs to be kind of I think, sort of a classic adventure film almost. And it sounds like this might be a good recipe for that.
Okay, here we go. Brand new trailer to Secret Invasion. We're going to break it down live for you in maybe what is our first ever time doing this. So if you're just listening, we're going to pause the audio and talk over top of it. If you're watching on YouTube or on Spotify and soon to be a few other platforms, you can see the trailer and watch us talk about it at the same time. So this will be fun, new for us. It releases on Disney Plus June 21st. So we're about to shift into kind of Guardians world for a month or so, where it's going to be all Guardians for a month, which also, by the way, some new footage there looks so cool. And then we will start shifting gears into Secret Invasion after that. But to give this trailer its due, here we go. Robbie, I'm going to play this and we're going to watch it, and tell me, just say pause if you need me to pause it if you want to say something, okay? At any point, I'll stop it. You can tell me. Here we go.
Fury, since you've been gone.
Okay, really quick. How long has he been gone? I thought about this. I saw this on the trailer.
I think, there are people that have followed the exact chronology of all the post-Endgame stuff, and I think that it seems to have been a bit messy between, because I think in No Way Home, we hear that as of No Way Home, he's been off-world for a year.
So hold on. He's dusted. He comes back during Endgame. Then in Far From Home, we find out that was never him.
Right.
Correct?
Correct.
So we still have not gotten a locator.
Yeah. So
No.
That's good.
He comes to Tony Stark's funeral. Is that really him?
So that's what, because he does. Yes, I think to start back, we see him dusted. We see him come back, and I think that is supposed to be him.
Okay.
In Endgame, I think that everything after that, in terms of what we see in Far From Home with him and Peter interacting, is not him. And then we see at the end of Far From Home, which we'll talk about here in a second, him on the ship with Skrulls. The reason I call out No Way Home is I think that you could argue there is a slight discrepancy there, because he says, which again, I mean, maybe the damage control guy doesn't have an exact figure, I guess is the kind of no prize there. But he says that Fury's been off-world for a year. But I think that Far From Home, which is supposed to take place kind of immediately prior to that conversation, in No Way Home is supposed to be like 8 months-ish after the end of the blip, after the battle at the end of Endgame. So I think it's like...
So we're like a year and 8 months, plus maybe a little bit to this, maybe 2 years at this point.
Yeah, as of No Way Home, and then. So I think a couple years, I would say.
Okay, here we go.
Things have gotten much worse.
Okay, pause real quick. I'm not going to do this often, but I heard this in the trailer, and we are not of this persuasion. And I've not been on social media much lately, but I heard, since you've been gone, things have gotten much worse, and I couldn't help but think of all of the people that have just really disliked Phase 4 really owning this particular sentiment. Again, I don't feel that way, but it just...
People made memes like Tony Stark or something. Since you've been gone, things have been much worse. Okay, really quick. One, I'm just so stoked for this cast, and to see Ben Mendelsohn back is so cool. And
dude, the whole trailer, and I'll say this now because otherwise I would say this every bit along the way, but Candace and I were watching the other night, and I knew most of the cast ahead of time, but she didn't. And it's like every reveal, it's like, wait, holy cow.
She's here? He's here? Yeah.
Yeah.
Also,
wild.
last thing, that explosion looks legit.
Yeah.
Looks really cool. So that, I don't know this. Again, it's just one trailer. That looked like an explosion they did to a building on a real location. And I don't know if that's true, but it looks amazing. So hopefully, we'll see.
How you think I came back?
The music's dope, by the way.
You're in no shape for this fight that lies before us. Old friend.
This is a new character.
Man.
Really quickly, are we supposed to know anything about her? Or that she's just like MI6 version of what Fury's doing?
I think that's all we know. I have kind of had suspicions that that she is kind of the analog to the Skrull leader in the Secret Invasion comics, who is kind of this. Well, man, I don't know. There's a lot of interesting stuff there because
from a film perspective, I don't know her. I'm not supposed to, and she's not a direct character in the comics. You'd have to stretch it.
Not that I'm aware of, or at least not one that I recognize from the Secret Invasion series.
Okay, and we don't know anything about this bad guy either, right? This Skrull that can multiply.
Well, no. Although was that a Skrull that can multiply, or were that just a lot of Skrulls?
Oh, and they're all just shape. Yeah. Sorry, they're all shape-shifting the same person.
But to your point, I do think we get some shots of Skrulls doing different things later in the trailer, and that is kind of going back to our Fantastic Four comment. One of the oldest Skrull stories, maybe from Stan Lee days, if not right after. They developed the Super Skrull, which was like at the time the Skrulls were primarily a Fantastic Four villain, and so he had all the powers of the Fantastic Four. But I think since then you've seen, once we got the Secret Invasion, Bendis kind of used that to great effect and had the Skrulls able to actually replicate the powers of all these different heroes they were impersonating. And so I do think we're going to see Skrulls kind of leveled up here from what we got in Captain Marvel.
This is personal.
Very few of us
you had to
know
love the
about
Winter
wars
Soldier
fought
shout
in
out
the
here.
shadows that have raged on this planet.
Martin Freeman's back, another person.
Yeah.
Emilia Clarke, that's the craziest reveal of anybody. She is, I guess, confirmed. I don't know the comics, okay, ever, but she's not playing the person people thought. I think a Brand, Agent Brand or something is who they thought. And she's actually confirmed to be, this is my understanding, Talos' daughter.
Yeah, who we met in Captain Marvel.
I've
seen folks say that doesn't totally rule out her serving the same function as Agent Brand. Like I think you have to look at like Loki, where they kind of combined the woman variant of Loki and Enchantress into Sylvie. So they could do something like that here.
Do you feel responsible?
I love trailers.
Also, just Olivia Colman is so good.
Where are the Avengers shout out? Freaking love it.
This war is one I have to fight alone.
See what I mean about the effects?
Yeah.
You're the most wanted man on the planet.
Rhodey.
A Rhodey, Don Cheadle. I mean, look at the cast. I mean, are you kidding me? As I pause this, that's insane.
Insane.
You don't know what they have planned for you.
Okay, that box says specimen on it that they're opening up, and it's got like, liquid nitrogen cooling. I'm fascinated to see what that is.
Yeah.
A Skrull specimen, like a genetic thing that they could replicate, or?
Well, we'll be going in. We've kind of gone through some of it already, but we'll be going into this in the Comics Corner stuff around Secret Invasion. But that is a big. There's a big component, like what I was just saying about them being able to transform the way that they can, where they basically crack the code of how to like fully adopt these superpowers, but I think in a way that also just kind of allows them to grant themselves these added abilities. So I wonder if that's where we're heading, and if that's what that is.
The great Nick Fury.
That effect right there, the special effects of Ben Mendelsohn turning back into Talos, like half turning, looks incredible.
Yeah.
And then like a Flurkin arm or something?
Oh, yeah, that is like a Flurkin arm.
Yeah, so like it seems like a couple things. Again, for the people that have been frustrated with Phase 4, which is not us, but if you've been frustrated with Phase 4, it does feel like this has a shot at bringing people back in on the visual effects side of things and on the like massive cast kind of thing and the prestige feel of it. Not to mention going back to the roots of like this super soldier spy thing, you know?
Yeah, this is, I felt for a bit that this would be the Disney Plus show to potentially bring some casual viewers back after several shows that I think people like, regardless of the quality, you know, there weren't hooks for certain folks. And so I think the star power alone in this, but there's so much. I mean, I'm excited to talk about this more, especially after we kind of get past Guardians. But we also got a really big article about these various updates in Secret Invasion that we had not gotten yet, kind of alongside this trailer, or I guess right before, where there's a lot of quotes from Samuel L. Jackson and Kobe Smulders and kind of filling in some blanks and connecting some dots from Captain Marvel to here, where they've actually kind of, I won't say it here in part because I know some people don't like to hear these things anyway, but they gave a lot of the setup. So a lot of the questions that we've had going into who is this and how do we get from here to here have already kind of been answered by Disney.
I also just love how like disheveled, or is that a word? Like disgruntled, beat up Nick Fury looks. And you're talking about, this is my last thing. You talked about the cast just being pure star power. I am not trying to start a conversation of comparing Disney Plus to HBO or Netflix or anything, but the cast alone is actually something that they can boast that these other companies can't even boast. In fact, of like taking massive A-list movie stars and putting them together. So I hope that this is kind of the first time in a while they just lean into that. Like, let's lean into the fact that you have like 5 superstars here.
Yeah.
I hope that's what it is.
Yeah. No, I mean, and that is the first time we've had that in a Disney Plus show since Moon Knight, right? Where we had Oscar Isaac and Ethan Hawke, I think.
Yeah. But this just with even the cameo level of the people that are coming in for cameos.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. And I mean, the number of it's like triple the amount of A-list movie stars.
All right, let's get into Spider-Man Far From Home because this trailer serves as a pretty good transition after a quick word from these sponsors.
All right. Spider-Man Far From Home, directed by John Watts, starring Tom Holland, Zendaya, Jake Gyllenhaal, and Samuel L. Jackson. Once again, fitting here. Here's how we're going. Samuel. Here's how we're going to start this off. I've so enjoyed Kyle's summaries, and I feel like you all have as well, from what I've heard. So we're going to level that up even, evolve further. Okay. Because what people don't know about you is just the true measure of your talent. You know, when it's sort of like,
I don't know where this is going.
It's like people talk about how art is supposed to be so free form, but really, like the frame itself, like the corners of the painting
What are you
within that,
talking
the
about?
structure provides really greater freedom, and in that way,
Like Loki, we crave it.
like we crave it.
Subjugation.
So I'm creating some borders here that I think are just going to allow you to thrive even further. In that, we are going to see if Kyle can do his Far From Home summary in 1 minute exactly.
Get stretched out here.
What we're going to do is I'm going to start this timer, and when I hit start,
Oh, I haven't seen this one in a little bit.
love it, all the better. We are going to hear from Kyle what happened in Spider-Man Far From Home. So,
Ready?
3, 2, 1, go.
We get the funny after effects of the returning of the blip with people coming back to school and how that would mess up the different ages of kids that were in school and weren't in school. And that is Peter. He's struggling with his friends of who was gone, who wasn't gone, including some kids that like his new girlfriend that now he wants to take out, like Brad. So they go out of school to a field trip to Europe where they're going to do some sightseeing. But while there, things go awry because there's this new like elemental monster that's taking over everything. But thankfully, this new superhero, Mysterio, comes in to save the day. He can shut down the elementals, and he claims that from a different dimension, the elementals ruined his world. Mysterio, Nick Fury, and Spider-Man work together to stop the elementals, except you find out halfway through that Mysterio's actually bad. It's actually him creating the elementals, all with drones, using some of the tech now that Peter has willingly given over that Tony Stark gave him. He gives them over to Mysterio. Mysterio is now the bad guy, and Spider-Man has to work to stop him. Meanwhile, MJ finds out that he is Spider-Man in all this because of a couple accidents there. So MJ, Ned, and Peter work to stop Mysterio, and they do ultimately kill Mysterio, but not before Mysterio reveals Spider-Man's true identity at the very end of the film, and it turns out that Nick Fury the whole time was actually Talos, a Skrull, pretending to be Nick Fury and help on that side of things. So mostly things are wrapped up. Peter is stronger and better than ever, has more tech. He has that tech back from Tony Stark, and Mysterio is done, except that his identity is now revealed.
Wow. You did go like 30 seconds over.
That was the time? That was 10 seconds left, you were saying? Oh,
yeah,
no.
Sorry.
Okay, maybe 2 minutes.
But it was so good. I couldn't stop you.
Holy cow.
Maybe I'll give you 2 minutes next time. It depends on how nice you are to me between now and then.
The comedy aside, the main theme that I'm missing is that Peter is struggling with the loss of Iron Man, and what does it mean for him to step into a more, a leadership role like Iron Man was, and does it even work for somebody like Peter to be in that role?
Yeah.
Which is the main theme of the movie.
Well, and that's the perfect segue into why this is where it is in our watch order.
Okay.
I think that the beauty of having Far From Home as the third post-Endgame project is kind of threefold. One, given that it was actually designed to function as a direct follow-up to Endgame, this came out 2 or 3 months after Endgame in 2019, it feels strange to have it thrown in, can feel strange to have it thrown in the middle of what we've kind of talked about as this reflection trilogy. But it feels much better, I think, to have it as the conclusion of that trilogy. So rather than have it just as the start, where it kind of was in the release order, or having it second just after WandaVision, I think it works really well here because it sort of sums up what we've been talking about over these last few weeks in getting a larger look at the ramifications of the tail end of the Infinity Saga and particularly Endgame. And it's the first time we really kind of take a full look at the Avengers side of that. Like we talked about starting really small scale with Westview, and then zooming out to the geopolitical side with Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But now here with Far From Home, it's the first time that we've kind of looked at the global picture from like an Avengers perspective, right? Like ever since the first Avengers film, a lot of the superheroes we've seen have been saving the world from some kind of Earth-threatening event or Malekith. And I think this is the first time we kind of come back to this, right? Because even though Falcon and the Winter Soldier deals a lot with things all over the world, it's still fairly grounded in terms of the kind of superheroics element. Here we get what we think is another world-ending event,
Avengers level threat.
With the elementals, like you were saying. It ends up being kind of a different thing, but I think still putting the focus on that, even such that we get the first use of the Avengers theme since Endgame here. Something that I think feels kind of more earned as the conclusion of this trilogy than it does just as the follow-up to Endgame. I also think, like we've said before, the comedy here functions much better after we've had two more serious looks at what's supposed to be a really traumatic event, to where now it's like we're kind of craving that a little bit. Two other things briefly that I like about this is...
By the way, pause. That is true and wild that the first look we had at the blip post-Endgame, 2 months after Endgame or 3 months after Endgame, July, I think, was so like funny.
I mean, even like the actual opening of Far From Home, you know, after the kind of cold open with Jake Gyllenhaal is funny.
It's very funny. The band is funny, but you're right. Like if you don't have any projects that focus on the real loss and tension of that, that's almost inappropriate.
Yeah, it's a strange.
So you're right. I like it here.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think that I would be really curious to see when Far From Home would have been released, if not for the Sony of it all. But secondly, after the kind of cold open or in some ways prologue that is WandaVision, this feels like such an appropriate way to recap the immediate effects of the conclusion to the Infinity Saga of Infinity War and Endgame, in that the Infinity Saga begins really with a look at Captain America, Steve Rogers, and Iron Man, Tony Stark. And so I really like that here at the top, we follow both of those threads first. It's like we have WandaVision kind of introducing the multiverse saga as a whole, and then the kind of burning questions about the legacies of the, two big characters that drove so much of the narrative for the last saga and are now both kind of off the board. And then finally, after our initial check-in with the Avengers that we get in that opening kind of almost press mob scene, where Peter's being questioned, are you the new Tony Stark? I do like that it then just kind of continues to expand in the trend that we've been, and following that trend that we've been talking about, where it's you kind of go around the world and then you start to, you get even the introduction of the multiverse as a concept, although what's kind of fun is you don't know at the end of this whether that's real or not. You're kind of left thinking it's not, based on just the Jake Gyllenhaal interactions and conversations there. I also like that, and the reason I kind of keep talking about the tour around the world is we won't come back to New York again until that final scene of Far From Home that blends into No Way Home. So it's like we have that cliffhanger at the end of this, where we get the reveal of Peter's identity, like you said. And then I sort of like this idea of pausing right there in terms of the threads that we've really known moving forward in like the US group of Avengers. And then in the next block, we'll kind of go we'll do Eternals, and we'll look at Moon Knight, and even Love and Thunder is there's very little there about kind of what's going on Earth, especially with the kind of main through line of the Avengers that we've been following, even though Thor is obviously one of the big three there. So that's sort of
I love that somebody decided to weed whack your lawn like right now, or leaf blow or something. Right now while you're doing. Oh, they just stopped.
Are they? I can't hear anything.
Yes, they were. That whole thing, which is a just great treat for our listeners.
Yeah, that's the danger of the noise canceling headphones. I'm just blissfully unaware.
While you're trying to talk to me about Spider-Man. Hey, I agree with everything. I like it here. And I think all the reasons you said are true. I don't need to say anything else. I also think just practically, you can't really put it too much further away from Endgame because it just starts feeling out of place. And you couldn't put it too much closer because we talked about with the seriousness of the blip returning. It's better to have those other two kick off the new phase. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. But plus everything you just said. I agree.
And I think the thing that I hope people keep in mind that I really enjoyed on this last rewatch is that idea of this kind of being a pause in that particular storyline that we saw really start in the prior phases. Because I just think it makes the second batch of projects we're going to visit. I think it contextualizes them as kind of a like meanwhile that then sort of culminates in a really great finale of Loki.
So before I blaze through the quick nitty gritty of what works and what doesn't work, I actually do want to hear from you first. React to my first overarching principle real quick. I think that this movie, if you can somehow view it not through the lens of a lifelong Spider-Man fan, of the comics, of the TV show, of what the character should be, what the character shouldn't be, I think this movie is phenomenal. If you can somehow view it not through that lens. Because I feel like in past conversations, most of the critique of the film comes from, it usually comes from those kinds of people, the Dan Gavazans of the world who like and know more about Spider-Man than anyone in the world. But also it comes from the perspective of, that's not the Spider-Man I know. But I would argue if you're just watching the MCU and Spider-Man is a character you just got introduced to and it's new in Civil War and Homecoming, this, and then Infinity War and Endgame, this feels like a very good natural follow-up to what the MCU character was struggling with.
I think that's very fair.
Oh my goodness, I gotta correct something. The leaf blower is my house. It's happening outside my house. So they did get to hear that. So I'm sorry. Oh, how the turntables.
How the turntables.
React to that, and then we can go through all the little things. Sure.
Yeah. No, I think that's very fair. And I should say, first off, this is the first movie that came out after you and I had started the conversations that would lead to the podcast.
Yeah.
So this is the first one that I remember you and I talking.
Yes.
Right after seeing. And
the first movie I remember feeling like I need to see like 4 times because I was working a golf tournament. So I went like twice while I was working because I felt like for the first time, like this might end up being like work or part of the conversation. So I better really know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I remember loving it. And I think the thing I said to you when I first walked out was I actually don't know how I would rank this against Homecoming, just in terms of how much I enjoyed it on a first watch. I think it,
and that was me too. I walked out of the theater and went, "Oh my goodness, how do they keep coming up with good stories?" Because I really thought they were going to be out once Endgame was done, and I remember going like, "That was really awesome." Still,
and I mean, to the point where I was really, really disappointed whenever it looked like the Tom Holland Spider-Man stuff was going to be done, because there was that bit where the Sony and Marvel relationship broke down.
Yes.
And I was like, man, we just had a really, really, like, one of my favorite MCU movies, you know, in a while. I think on the one hand, kind of looking back on it now, I think that every time I rewatch it, it's not that I see issues with it. And, you know, again, I kind of had the same level of familiarity with Spider-Man comics and other adaptations then as I do now. So I don't know that that's affected it, but I do think you're right to call that out. I think for me, it's just, it feels a bit like a middle installment, you know, where it's like, I like a lot of the Tony Stark reflection stuff. That's probably my favorite part. I really love, actually, no, I think Mysterio is my favorite part, although that plays into that really perfectly.
Spider-Man as a trilogy has definitely had the best villains, not even close.
Yeah.
Between Vulture, Mysterio, and then the collection and the new one.
That's true. Yeah, it's not even close. I think depending on what the third Black Panther film looks like, that could be a strong contender.
Oh, that's a good point. Killmonger and Namor. Yeah.
But yeah, I think as of now, I think on the other hand, you know, as much as I think a lot of the stuff just kind of is it's fine for me. It doesn't do a ton emotionally for me other than some of the Tony moments. I do think that having No Way Home contextualizes this in a helpful way, because I think at the time it was sort of unclear, and I think it's part of why Spider-Man fans got so upset. It was unclear where they were trying to take the character, like if they were in fact trying to say even though the movie says he's not going to be the new Tony Stark, is he going to be some kind of new figurehead within the Avengers? Is it going to, because that's such a different thing. And I think at the time you and I had said, well, if so, that's fine, because we've gotten all these other versions of Spider-Man anyway. But then ultimately knowing that No Way Home both changes direction, but also in a way that feels like it doesn't feel like a left turn, right? Like it's not like going from The Last Jedi to Rise of Skywalker, where it's like,
no, he still uses some of the tech that he had from Tony Stark.
Right.
Like there are a lot of transition pieces. And at the end of this, like I don't think you end this movie thinking like, okay, he is like the lead Avenger now.
No. I think this is just where a lot of the Iron Man Jr. stuff really came, which is also funny because that's another thing that gets kind of addressed head on in No Way Home. But yeah, that's my perfect point, right? Is like, I think for me, I understand why you would say Iron Man Jr. I totally see all the reasons. I mean, in a lot of ways he is. Like they definitely made this version of Peter Tony Stark's child. Right.
But it just doesn't bother me. Like if
I
didn't have past preconceived notions of Spider-Man, I don't dislike that he's Tony's son. So for me, just preference-wise, that has never been my hang-up. But I totally get it. And like I honestly even fully get if you were a lifelong Spider-Man fan, why that would bother you. I do. So that's just where I ended up like leaving this conversation with so many people is like, I think, Robbie, I think there's a trend forming here. I think I really like fun, breezy movies. Iron Man, Iron Man 2, Homecoming, Far From Home, Ragnarok. Like, if the movie can do emotional carrying, I love that. Quantumania.
Right.
If it can do emotional carrying, I love it. But yeah, I don't leave Far From Home like choked up or like emotionally drained. But I think I just, in my preference rankings, like those kinds of movies sometimes. And I think I'm realizing I like them more than most people.
Well, yeah, I mean, so you noted a couple weeks ago that you would actually put this preference-wise above Spider-Man Homecoming.
Which is, I'll save for my reveal here at the end of the episode, but yeah.
But, and you know, that I go back and forth with. I think I like the Spider-Man, some of the Spider-Man scenes that we get in terms of I love the Mysterio, the first big illusion scene. I love the final battle. I love like the way that we see Spider-Man move there, and like the reveal of the wings, like the web wings under his arm. Like I think it's a lot of fun when he is doing the Spider-Man stuff.
I think I overrate that for sure. Because even like the last Peter Tingle scene is not nearly as long as I remember it. Like in the theater, I remember being like, oh my gosh, this is one of the cool, like visually it's one of the coolest Spider-Man looking things we've ever had, where he goes like all black and has to dodge all those things.
Oh,
not to mention, I think Mysterio's incredible, and the illusions they create are so creative and like visually stunning. So like when he's Spider-Maning, I just get lost in that and I end up overrating it, where I'm like, that was so much fun.
Well, I mean, but there are things like I not just, I mean, Jake Gyllenhaal does such a good job of playing the villain in a way. It's like, what was crazy about it for me is
that reveal was massive chills for me.
Well, and I came in like knowing that Mysterio is a Spider-Man villain, so it's like there was almost no way that wasn't going to be the turn, and the turn still worked for me.
Okay, like, and as a reference, let's just do this, right? Because you were a massive fan, so you came in knowing, and the turn still works. I came in like half knowing, like I knew Mysterio was bad, but halfway through I'm like, oh, is that what the MCU is doing? Is they're just like changing it so that he's actually helpful? Yeah. So like, even me, like I bought it because I was like, I thought he was a bad character. My mom, as a third example, who knew nothing about anything, went like this. What? What?
Yeah.
No. What's happening? Kevin. That's my dad. Kevin. What? She was so blown away. So you have 3 different parties there, and I think it still works for all 3 people.
Yeah. No, I mean, everything about that performance, the writing, I thought was so
Somebody
it was so
get
good.
This stupid thing off me.
even the way that his hair, when he's in like Mysterio Quentin Beck mode, kind of looks like classic Tony Stark hair, so that whenever he puts on the Edith glasses, it's like Peter feels like he's looking at Tony Stark. It's like it works on so many levels. And then beyond that, it works on this kind of meta level of then, you know, the MCU was coming up out of Endgame, but had also been dealing with this, you know, even back then, the superhero fatigue kind of a thing, where people were saying, oh, they're just doing the same thing and hitting the same beats. And the way that movie addresses that on so many levels, I think is really impressive, because it's that thing we always say, it's hard to do the meta thing without taking you out of the story, like without it feeling like you're just getting commentary that's like so thinly veiled, there's almost no plot there. Here, I never felt that way, but I do love the lines about like these days nobody listens unless you have a cape and you're shooting lasers out of your hands, and like, because there's so many conversations about right, and it's like so people are saying, oh, well, there's so many movies getting squeezed out of the theaters now because people only want to see superhero movies, you know, and it's like you see him as the, like, especially when you see him in kind of the directorial mode, right, where he's got the hair slicked back and he's wearing the all black or the mocap suit, and it's like he gives this kind of tortured genius director thing, like he's some kind of like Aronofsky.
Renamed my life's work Barf. Like that's the kind of stuff. Okay, everything on the Mysterio front, I'm gonna say this totally legit, it's not just a 10 out of 10. It's like, for me, spectacular.
It's an 11 out of 10.
It's 11 out of 10. It's 110%, as my high school coaches would always say. I like the idea that Peter is reflecting on the loss of Tony, and then here's a guy who, to him, Tony's the villain. And it's so stupid that we worship this guy. because the guy did all the work. Like, that's so good. His actual acting, so good. The reveal and the twist, so good. I love the idea of coming out of Endgame, the Avengers level threat. Like, even saying that, like you're saying, the meta commentary is so genius. Because we were all thinking like, oh, they're going to just try to top it with a new villain or whatever.
Right.
And they actually pull the rug out from under us. It's actually just a guy who's smart, using tech to make us believe that he's actually an Avengers level threat, to where you'd have to call the Avengers, which don't exist. I just like everything about it. I really do.
And just like some of the comments about like your idea for a story about a space hero from another universe is so stupid and apparently exactly what people will believe right now.
Yes. Or like when he goes, quick, what does he say? Like, the elementals, I can feel it. They're falling. And then Samuel Jackson goes, now that right there, that's BS. He says that. Like, you're like, yeah, that's exactly, he's trying to come up with something.
Yeah, which, by the way, that's one of the things that I do struggle with here that we've talked about before.
Hold on. What works? Then we get into what doesn't work.
Okay, fine.
You have to say some other nice things about the movie. Go fast.
I mean, I feel like I was just very nice to the movie.
I know.
You want more?
The music, the love theme when he kisses MJ on the bridge at the end. One of my favorite songs Michael Giacchino's ever created, hands down. Listen to it all the time.
I think this score in general is a level up to me.
From the first film. Yep.
From the first film.
Happy is still so funny. The humor in general is really good. Like, it's almost funnier than Homecoming to me.
Yeah, I think so. I think the humor does work really well here for me. And a lot of that is the Peter side. Like I like some of the interactions that he has with Ned here. I really like the development of he and MJ's relationship. I think that really that's the bit, like the identity reveal at the end and the establishment of he and MJ kind of as an item is those are the big takeaways from this movie that I think wind up working really well moving forward. I think that one thing that...
Okay, transition us. What doesn't work?
Well, no. I was going to say one thing that I think some people didn't like that I did like is I like how kind of awkward and like actual teenage the interactions between him and MJ are. You know, like I like that. Like even the kiss is not this like crazy romantic kiss. It's like
like the first original Spider-Man high school interactions, right? Like high school in major quotes. This is what high school is like, okay?
Even Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, you know, it's much
such a
more
mature relationship.
Yeah. I mean, it's angsty, you know, like that whole film series is angsty, but it's not. They're not leaning into the kind of Disney Channel of it the way they are here, and I say that I think as a compliment because I like that completes or furthers, I should say, the tone that they were setting with Homecoming, which like when you read about what John Watts was trying to do with Homecoming and then really moving forward until about midway through No Way Home, which is when you get the real turn, he wanted to do Spider-Man in high school in a way that felt like Spider-Man in high school. Because it's like we've technically gotten that so many times without ever having really gotten it.
The way Peter and MJ go on that date and they go on a walk and the interaction they have there is more authentic to high school than any relationship Spider-Man's ever portrayed in any of those movies. To high school. They're 16. That's what it felt like when I was 16.
Yeah.
Like you don't really know what to say, but you're kind of into this person. And obviously the interaction is going to be awkward because you're not like a pro socializer at this point.
Mm-hmm.
You're not kissing upside down in the rain. You're just like talking outside. I'm just saying for high school.
No, for sure. Which in fairness, the kissing upside down in the rain is when he's in college in the Raimi trilogy.
Which is all my kisses in college. Yep. Anyways, I do think it nails that part well too. I've said this 10 trillion times on the podcast. This is what makes No Way Home so good and one of my favorite movies they've ever created. If after No Way Home they stay with this vibe, it's a total failure. But for the coming of age, it's perfection. There's no in between.
And that's why, and we'll obviously talk about this more then, but that's why I think the turn midway through No Way Home is key, because I think even if they had kept this through the entirety of No Way Home, I think I maybe would have not loved that. But the fact that, because I mean, that's the genius thing about that movie. And I'm just saying it here because this, you're right, it does continue to set that up. Like normally the Spider-Man origin is, oh, here's carefree. I mean, here's Peter, he's kind of bullied, but then he gets his powers and now he's carefree and everything's fun and he gets to be famous and on TV. And then Uncle Ben dies and it's his fault and he kind of has this earth-shattering moment. And what this trilogy does is really stretch out the first part of that so that you really feel the drop when it comes with Aunt May's loss in a way that, I mean, I think those moments have worked reasonably well in both of the other film adaptations, but I think that these had the opportunity to do it, I think, to at least a sort of decompressed, maybe more impactful way. So I do like that. Yeah, I think...
So I think the Spidey action's incredible. I think the relationship that Peter has and the growth there is good. I like the reflection on Tony Stark. I think the music is a step better. I think the visuals are really, really cool. I think overall the acting performances are really well done. I think Mysterio is a great villain. That's basically my summary of what works. What doesn't work?
Yeah, so I think the big thing for me, you know, doesn't work as a... This is going to kind of be my theme for Far From Home as I'm talking about what doesn't work. I never watched this movie and have moments or like issues per se. Like there are other things that we'll talk about as we move forward in the watch order, and also things from the Infinity Saga where I'm just like, I don't like that. I don't really have anything like that here.
Okay.
It's just there are things that don't...
There's nothing wrong from a movie making perspective.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There are just things that I think I understand where certain folks are coming from. Like first, I think the Peter Parker stuff here, it doesn't work for me quite as well as Homecoming does. Not that I think any of it's bad, and I see that the stuff that's really focused on the progression of him and MJ I like a lot. I think that it suffers some, frankly, from the decision to have Samuel L. Jackson not actually be Nick Fury there, but be Talos, because I think that some of the Peter moments that I liked a lot in Homecoming were some of those kind of heart moments. And I think that I kind of would have liked the dynamic there between him and actual Nick Fury, and that to kind of mirror, again, like we were saying, the way the Infinity Saga started. However, I think, looking at how it actually turned out, that's just kind of further evidence of what we were saying this whole reflection trilogy kind of becomes, is like you can't hold on to what was, like in the same way that there can't be a new Tony Stark. Like when his identity is revealed, it does not go well like it did with Tony. And he doesn't have the cool, okay, I'm going to start working with Nick Fury moment, because it turns out it's not Nick Fury. And so I do like them bucking that trend. I just think that the impact is some of those kind of like, are you going to step up, Parker moments, I think lose a little bit of efficacy, knowing that that's just Talos, who doesn't really have any real investment in Peter or the Avengers legacy.
So I only have two what doesn't work things, and that's one of them. And even that, I go back and forth on. Annika and I go back and forth on it all the time. When I first watched it, you remember I hated it so much that I said, like, man, I'm just not going to watch the post-credit scene because I don't want to lose what you're saying, all of the moments between Nick Fury and Peter. because I feel like we got some cool growth there. So for a long time, I was totally against it. But Annika was totally for it, and she always has been, because she has always felt like that didn't feel like Nick Fury. Like he was too aggressive. He was too mean about are you going to step up? And there wasn't enough grace for this kid having to quote unquote step up, that she was like, gosh, it better not be really Nick Fury, because that, like, there's no growth there. I'm pissed at how he's treating Peter.
Well, and the fact that he's kind of duped by Mysterio feels not, you kind of don't want Nick Fury to be tricked in that way.
So then when she gets to the end credit scene, she's like, thank you. That's what I've said. Like, it doesn't feel like Nick Fury. So I've always gone back and forth on that. But I think in general, the fact that I'm going back and forth on it is one of my what doesn't work. Like, I don't know why. I just can't settle on what I wanted for that.
I think
so minor for me, but
yeah, I don't know what my proposed edit would be there, because I do especially like it setting up now what we know about Secret Invasion. I just don't know if maybe there was a way to make those scenes not feel like they were supposed to carry some of the weight they did. Not that they're like hugely pivotal scenes. I think I just bring that up regardless of whether you like the general decision, because I think it plays into how I feel about those Peter moments throughout. Because the other thing, I think in Homecoming, I loved the high school vibe in general so much. Like it just, all the interactions with the classmates worked really well. And the field trip stuff, it felt perfect to me. Like I think that movie is perfect. The only thing that I ever think with Homecoming that is honestly eased every time I rewatch is I always feel like there are not enough kind of fun Spider-Man scenes. And I do, like I said, I think that you get better Spider-Man scenes here in a way that feels natural, because he's kind of matured and gotten more comfortable as Spider-Man by the time you get here. But that is one thing. It's like I really love the, like, him and Ned moments in Homecoming, them in the hotel and him having to sneak out. And I even like the crush on Liz as a part of Homecoming, even though, MJ is obviously a much more pivotal character and Zendaya is great. I think that they just captured this kind of crush feeling so well in the first film, that there are elements of that, of the high schoolness, that just don't translate quite as well here. Maybe in part because I never had any sort of experience resembling a European trip with all of my high school friends, especially not like in a field trip setting. So it just doesn't click with me the same way.
Yeah, that's changing, by the way. My nephew right now is 14. He's in the Philippines right now with his class.
That's wild. I mean, I will say,
but I didn't do it either.
But to play my own devil's advocate, I guess, one thing that does strike me as kind of familiar is the way that when I did take trips, not to Europe, but summer trips with friends through school or whatever, you do have those little, like, people pair up on trips, like there are relationships that start because it's like the person that you wound up sitting next to on the bus or whatever and sharing headphones with. And they do capture a lot of that stuff.
Bachelor in Europe.
With the splitter. Yeah. And so I think, again, none of it's bad. I just think that there was something really, really perfect about the way they did it in Homecoming. And the thing of this sitting in the middle, it's not getting to No Way Home yet, where they're kind of taking that to its crescendo. So it just kind of has to hold the line, which I think it does well.
Yeah. So my only other what doesn't work, and then I'll give one caveat, is kind of what you're saying. And it's just that, like, when I look back on it, I talk about how I like the fun, breezy nature of it. But like I said, I don't have a massive impact that I feel from this film. Like, I don't have my God of Hammers moment that I get in Ragnarok. So Ragnarok's a fun, breezy action movie that's cool to watch, but then I still have this God of Hammers moment that gets me so, like, revved up. And I don't have, like, even Love and Thunder has the emotional, like, I get choked up at the end. I don't have that key thing.
Yeah,
Then
I think
again, I got to give my last disclaimer to all of this. You said this film has more Spider-Man time, which I really like. I weigh that so heavily. Again, the Peter Tingle stuff, the fighting at the end, the illusion trick in like the warehouse, all of it is so cool. And even with the Spider-Man front, I have to give that disclaimer, which is after No Way Home, I don't think I would be fully satisfied if we stopped here or after No Way Home. I still need another Spider-Man entry where he is the protector of New York City and he is swinging through New York City and doesn't have a ton of tech. Like, we've talked about this so many times, but because Homecoming, he's just learning stuff. Then here he's in Europe. I need a little more after this of that. So that's my only caveat. Again, in both the growing up and in the New York swinging stuff, if we don't ever get it, I will see it as a bummer. But for what they're telling here, it's perfect.
Yeah.
That's my disclaimer again.
Yeah, I mean, I think it set us up really well for that. And I will say, this is the first time, maybe really the only time, again, until the very last scene of No Way Home, but we do get him swinging through New York straight up, for the first time in an extended form. We get like little flashes of it, but so much of Homecoming is about the fact that he's in Queens.
Right.
And so I do like, I remember getting really pumped up in the theater just seeing him swinging in a way that's kind of reminiscent of the final scene in all the Spider-Man movies, that had come prior.
But you know what I mean. If you go back and watch The Amazing Spider-Man, look at the emphasis they put on like him slow motion flipping through downtown and then like zooming in on his eye. Like, it's a total different emphasis.
Well, and I still think the swinging mechanics as portrayed in the Amazing Spider-Man films are some of the best. I really like the way that they visualize the Andrew Garfield stuff.
I agree.
Yeah, I think the only other thing that I again, it's not what doesn't work, but I think that is part of what people feel when they feel like this doesn't feel like a Spider-Man movie, is like you don't think of Spider-Man operating in Venice. Like it doesn't, there are parts that feel core to Spider-Man that you can't capture in different locations. However,
but the MCU of it too is like, he's operated in Venice, in space, on that ship, on Titan. You're right. Like it hasn't been the typical, like Germany, like.
Well, and I think I like that because they were coming out of, like we said, all these other adaptations, including the game, right? Like a lot of really well-received films, also Into the Spider-Verse, to where it's like, I think that they felt like they needed to continue to explore new things. And so I don't fault them for that at all. Like, I don't think that just because you're doing a thing that no one's done before, you're not respecting the integrity of the character. Like, I don't buy into that sort of view, but I do feel like that's maybe why people don't think of this as a Spider-Man movie in the same way. The final thing that I'll say kind of on a positive that I like about this movie, that again, I think works really well as it's heading towards No Way Home. Spider-Man in more recent years, like especially in the Dan Slott era in the comics, they've had a lot of fun with new costumes, and you see that really reflected in the Spider-Man game. And this is the first time we've had that show up in this way. You have a costume change in design between other films, and then you have the symbiote suit, which is very much its own thing in Spider-Man 3. But I do like that, starting with Homecoming, we see him in the original Stark suit, and then we see him in his homemade suit, and we get the preview of the Iron Spider suit. And then here we see the Night Monkey suit, and then the suit that he creates. And then moving into No Way Home, we see him wearing like the different Stark suits and all of it kind of being torn away and culminating in the classic Spider-Man costume. So it's like, I think that, I don't know if this was always the plan to end in the way they ended No Way Home, or if that was kind of a game time decision. But in retrospect, so many of the things that I think could have wound up being what doesn't work moments for me wind up not being, because I can look at this all, like we've said, as one extended origin story where they get to play with all these things that are still kind of parts of the Spider-Man mythos. Like Spider-Man does go abroad, even as far back as like the Stan Lee, John Romita comics. Like, it's not like they invented that. They're just playing with a lot of different things before they kind of bring it home in such a fantastic way in the end of the third movie. So I think that's how I view this movie really in general, as like the best version of kind of what we talk about like Age of Ultron doing, which is like holding steady and giving you that, like, this is the character I know, like, these are here's the supporting cast, like these are the dynamics, and then we're going to kind of blow it all up in the next movie. And I think that without the stability there, then the blowing up is ineffective.
Which is a perfect transition into our rankings, because I have Age of Ultron so high. So again, there's a through line here. Maybe I like those eras. Maybe that's why I like Far From Home. Like, I like the stability era, maybe, is part of it. We've already talked about what's foundational going forward a lot, just by nature of what works and doesn't work, because we talked about No Way Home and what's going to happen. But then we've talked a lot about what we hope happens for Spider-Man and his friends beyond that. I think we'll talk about how you see his friends playing into a Spider-Man 4 or not after our reflection of No Way Home, where I think it's more appropriate of like, how do you see that character specifically going forward? But on our joint MCU rankings, so the official Friends from Work rankings, we have Far From Home currently at 15th of 32 films. So just above average, which I think feels about fair. If I was doing my critic ranking, I think on the critical side, I personally had it at 13th. So basically that range, like the very, very, very tippy top of the second tier of films, because of the things we talked about. But for me, and this is what I'm doing each week when we do this, it's 9th on my preference list. So I have, and I can say this at this point because all these films are films I've already seen. I think it will move to 10th once I add No Way Home into this list.
Fair.
Infinity War, Endgame, Civil War, Guardians 1, Ragnarok. That's my top 5 preference. Then it's Age of Ultron, 6, Avengers, 7, Iron Man, 8, Far From Home, 9, Homecoming, 10. With, again, the caveat that they'll all go down one spot with No Way Home, probably. So I think that's a perfect place for me, after years of wrestling with this, to end on that film. Because, as I've said so many times, I think I understand what you're even saying. I understand the critical perspective and not flaws, but maybe the things it's lacking a little bit. And that's where I'm willing to go, I see that, let's bump it down a little bit on the critical perspective. But in terms of just preference, and again, it's only one spot above Homecoming, I really wrestled between those two because I think they're both virtually perfect, Homecoming and Far From Home. But if you ask me right now, Robbie, you're coming over, Kyle, what movie do you want to watch, Homecoming or Far From Home? I think I would say, let's put on Far From Home, because I think on a rewatchability factor, I like that breeziness. I like that stability, as you call it, of the middle film where they are operating more as Spider-Man as I know him and see him with the Peter Tingle and all that stuff. So that's where I'm at. I don't think I'm crazy. I'm not saying I'm right. I just like it.
I totally agree. The more I think about it, the more I think that I do view this movie similarly to Age of Ultron. Not saying that I'm ranking them in the same spot, preference or critically, but just, it's sort of like to me, it's
the stepchild a little bit of the films, because that's that middle one.
But a villain performance that I think is kind of top tier. and often overlooked.
Cool visuals of the power sets of every character and stuff.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm curious if people
and both
feel
movies
that.
you knew like couldn't end with, in that case, like Tony Stark dying or Peter dying.
Right.
Like, you know, the stakes aren't that level because it can't end there.
Yeah, that's true. You know, it's heading somewhere.
And then ultimately, like, you kind of judge it differently based on the third or fourth movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, your view of this movie changes, which is, I think, also fair about Ultron. Like, it got better over time because of what we ended up seeing like it needed to be doing. Like, you saw the the Avengers get blown up and you saw what happened and you're like, oh man, remember the Ultron era? Like, it could have been like that. Yeah.
No, I think that's a really good point. I think it's the kind of thing that it feels a little meandering at times, but I think knowing what the end of the destination is, knowing what the destination is.
Yeah, sure.
Helps. Makes the journey feel, we know what the journey is. So yeah. My final note, I guess, of the episode in general that kind of wraps a lot of this up is, I do think we should wait to talk more about Spider-Man after No Way Home. That's the only character that gets 2 projects within this watch order. So we'll kind of put a pin in that. But to kind of go back to the Nick Fury of it all, I do think that final scene of him on the ship with the Skrulls is going to wind up being a really key starting point to Secret Invasion from what we've heard is going on, and kind of how the Skrull relationships have developed, and that I think that's supposed to be kind of going all the way back to Captain Marvel with this idea that Earth was going to help, or some humans were going to help the Skrull people find a safe homeland. And I think that we have never heard that ever happened. And I think that we are supposed to take that scene in Far From Home as showing that it has yet to happen and that they're still kind of a migratory people.
That is a great final word to tie this all together, because I think if you were telling people what's a mini rewatch to do before Secret Invasion, you wouldn't think of Far From Home right away. You would definitely be like, you got to see Captain Marvel. Mm-hmm. And that might be all you'd have to see, or maybe watch Endgame to see how, stuff went down.
Right.
But yeah, I think you have to include Far From Home because it does give us that glimpse. And I heard Emilia Clarke talking about her character in an article, and she said that exact thing, which is that as a kid, her character had expectations of finding this new world, and what happens if those expectations weren't met and the disappointment that comes with that. And it's yeah, you're right. If that's hinting at I don't mean this because I don't know this is where it's going, but you're right. Like, I haven't thought about it of like in that scene, it's almost like crass to the Skrulls if they don't end up finding a planet, because it seems like Nick Fury's treating it kind of just like cavalier. Like, he's on vacation and whatever. Like, I'm raised to say, and he's like joking around. And if they end up not finding a home planet, there could be some tension there of like, this isn't a joke to us. And Captain Marvel. Remember when Captain Marvel's name comes up, Monica Rambeau has got this weird look on her face like, oh, that didn't go like we wanted it to. And it could be that she left, but there could be more playing in there too of like, if they didn't go find a planet for them, if they didn't like achieve that mission, there could be some bitterness there too from the Skrulls and like that passed down or whatever. Because clearly she does know they're still Skrulls, Monica, I'm saying, right? Because she still is friends with them.
Right.
I'm just saying, like, there's maybe hints of all that kind of brewing.
Yeah, I like that. I think it's just going to be fun in general to start figuring out some of these kind of remix abbreviated watch orders just now that we have so many kind of full threads as we go. Like, you can always, it's in some ways it's as simple as just saying, okay, well, these are the main characters in this show, so let's just watch all of the movies or shows where those characters have ever appeared. But I think it gets a lot more fun when you're tracing particular storylines. And, I think that, I would probably put Winter Soldier on a rewatch order for Secret Invasion.
Okay.
You know, like
thematically,
maybe the first Avengers in terms of kind of what that establishes about Nick Fury. Like I think
we can come up with one.
Yeah, I think this is one of the things I'm kind of looking forward to, whether we do that formally or just kind of talk through it. But
I just gave myself chills. Well, you gave me chills when you brought up that post-credit scene, because now my brain's racing and I'm pumped about this. Like, also, just real quick, what is the other thing we always talk about from Captain Marvel? And maybe you can even throw Nick Fury in that. Like, we want to see some of that vulnerability in her power set and maybe just in how she's viewed. Like, you know, in Endgame, she comes in, she's clearly like the triumphant, better than everybody. Like, it kind of, like, one of my critiques is like, what's the point of Peter Parker saying like, why would he hold on to the gauntlet? He would obviously give it up right away. What's the point of all the women helping her when she can just fly through everything? But not just in the power set. I love this idea now of like, if she did fail in getting that planet too, or Nick Fury did as well, it kind of takes them down a notch in the view of like, they're untouchable. Like, I want to see Nick Fury and Captain Marvel fail as heroes sometimes.
Yeah.
Instead of always having a plan, which is, oh gosh, I'm kind of excited about this show.
Well, and I think even looking at that line from Talos, you know, people are asking about where the Avengers are, and then getting the line from Fury in the trailer where he's basically refusing to call in even the Avengers that he could call in. Like, I think that he's even progressed a lot since the last. I mean, we haven't had a full-on project with Nick Fury, like where we actually kind of get an update on Nick Fury since Age of Ultron. Like, we see him in the credits scene of Infinity War, we see him at the funeral of Tony, and then we see this scene where he's talking to Talos from the ship. And those are the only little moments we get with Fury, at least chronologically, since then. So I think it's, and really, like, even Age of Ultron didn't really move him much beyond where we left him in Winter Soldier, which is why I still feel like that's going to kind of be pivotal to tracing his arc.
You know, we talked about how we have that other vulnerability, or like the bad side of Tony Stark, right? We have that with Thor, even like when the kids met Thor in Love and Thunder now, and he's not the god that maybe people thought he was or portrayed him out to be. And what does that mean? And whatever. For the first time in my life, I'm literally getting stoked about what that could be for Captain Marvel. If Captain Marvel like negatively influenced Talos' daughter, Emilia Clarke, in a way that we haven't seen yet. Like, we haven't seen, like, when she misses expectation, what that does. Oh, that's actually, dude, we need that from that character. And I need like Emilia Clarke to be like jaded about it. That'd be kind of cool. I'm excited.
Man, I think this is, it'll be fascinating to see what Secret Invasion does to a lot of projects leading into it, you know, because we've talked about who could and could not be a Skrull, and we'll talk more about some of the speculation stuff there moving forward. But yeah, I mean, you're right. The Captain Marvel side, the Fury side, I think it could make Far From Home, even just in these little ways, more pivotal for what it shows. I think too, I would love to hear from people.
Yes.
Now that we're finishing this first chunk of the rewatch, because we won't be back with these until after Guardians. But what did you think about these first three as kind of a unit of setting this up as sort of the reflection on the Infinity Saga? What did you like? What did you not like? And, you know, do you feel some of these things that we're talking about with these projects, and this one really in particular, showing the futility of trying to recapture the magic of what we had in that original era, and, you know, kind of where that leaves us? Because I think it leaves us in this interesting spot of like, okay, well then, you know, what is it? And what is the next thing? And I think that really leads us perfectly into the next unit, which I'm really excited to talk about, even though there are projects in there that are much more controversial than the ones that we've discussed first.
So to reiterate what Robbie is saying, we are now, as of right now, officially turning the page on the rewatch order for now. We are going into Guardians mode. And don't turn off this episode. We need your help. To kick off our Guardians coverage, we're asking for some mailbag questions, an episode that we're now going to start calling Burning Questions. So kicking off next week, Guardians of the Galaxy Burning Questions. We want to hear from you. We want to play your voicemails on Friends from Work. So please give us a call. Leave us a voicemail at 615-933-9530 and ask us anything about Guardians. We haven't seen it yet. We're starting to do our research for it. Ask us anything you want, anything, and we're going to talk about that next week. And then, just by way of importance, because I think this is helpful for people to know, so April 13th, next Thursday, we are going to do those burning questions from Guardians of the Galaxy. On the 20th, we're going to have our Saga So Far episode, which has become really fun for us, which is just from a plot perspective, from an MCU perspective, how can we look back on these characters? Where have they been? Where are they going? Let's catch you up on all things Guardians before you see it. Then on the 27th, if all goes according to plan, we will have already seen the film, hopefully. So then Robbie and I are going to share our spoiler-free preview of it, and all of that culminates on May 4th with our initial reactions episode. Then you guys know the drill. Post that. We'll reflect on it. We'll bring in some creators from the show, etc., from the movie in this case. But that will also probably give us a few weeks in late May and early June to get back into the rewatch with the chunk that Robbie's excited about. So that's kind of the schedule, but it's crazy how fast this stuff just keeps going. But we're shifting gears. Give us a call, leave us a voicemail for Guardians of the Galaxy, which is what we're going to be talking about next week. Thank you so much for listening. Please like, review, and subscribe to this podcast everywhere, especially on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, etc. And we'll see you next time talking Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 here on Friends from Work.